The first time I heard someone walking around in the apartment above mine, I almost called the landlord. The problem was, the apartment above me had been empty since the day I moved in. I rented a tiny one-bedroom on the third floor because it was cheap and close to work. The building was old enough that every floorboard complained, but that didn't bother me. What bothered me was how predictable the footsteps became. Every night, right around 2:17 a.m., someone would begin pacing. Not running, not stomping. Just slow, measured footsteps that crossed from one side of the apartment to the other, paused, then returned. At first, I assumed a new tenant had moved in without my noticing. During the day, I listened for doors opening, furniture being moved, voices, anything. One Saturday, I walked upstairs to introduce myself. Apartment 4B stood directly above mine. The welcome mat was covered in dust. A strip of faded tape still stretched across the door from when maintenance had painted months earlier. No scratches, no footprints, no sign anyone had entered. I mentioned it to my landlord. He frowned. Still hearing that? The way he said, "still," made my stomach tighten. What do you mean? He shrugged too quickly. Old buildings make noise. I let it go, but the footsteps never missed a night. After a week, I started recording them. My phone captured every creak perfectly. You could even count the steps. 12 one direction, pause, 12 back. I sent the recording to my brother. He replied almost immediately. Why is someone whispering? I replayed it 5 times. There wasn't any whispering. When I asked what he meant, he insisted he could hear someone speaking underneath the footsteps. He couldn't understand the words, but he was certain a voice was there. That night, I wore headphones while listening to the recording. About halfway through, I heard it. A faint voice. Not above me. Right beside the phone. I ripped the headphones off so fast they snapped. I didn't sleep after that. Instead, I waited. At exactly 2:17, the footsteps started again. 12 steps. Pause. 12 back. This time, I noticed something different. My ceiling light swayed slightly every time the footsteps reached the center of the apartment above me. I grabbed a tape measure from my toolbox the next morning. From my living room wall to the kitchen entrance measured almost exactly 12 adult steps. The apartment above had the same floor plan. Whoever walked up there was following the exact layout of my apartment. That realization stayed with me all day. The next night, I stood in my living room while the footsteps began. When they stopped overhead, I took one slow step forward. Above me, another footstep answered. I froze. After several seconds, I took another. Again, a matching step echoed directly overhead. I spent nearly 2 minutes moving around my apartment. Every movement I made was answered from above, perfectly delayed by about 2 seconds. Like someone couldn't see me, only hear me. I left the apartment before sunrise. The following evening, curiosity got the better of me. I convinced my neighbor across the hall to come upstairs with me. He laughed the whole way, until we reached 4B. The footsteps were happening while we stood outside the door. Slow, heavy, back and forth. He knocked. Everything stopped instantly. Silence. Then, 3 knocks answered from the other side. Neither of us spoke. He walked downstairs without looking back. The next morning, he told me he'd found another place to live. He moved out before sunset. I should have done the same. Instead, I became obsessed. I borrowed the master key from maintenance while they were repairing another unit. I waited until noon. Bright sunlight filled the hallway. I unlocked 4B. The apartment was completely empty. No furniture, no appliances, just bare wooden floors covered in a thin layer of gray dust. Except a perfectly clean path stretched from one wall to the other. 12 footprints one direction, 12 back, over and over. Not shoe prints, bare feet. I followed them. They stopped directly over my living room. There was nothing there except an old ceiling vent. I knelt beside it. From somewhere below, I heard my own voice, laughing. It wasn't a recording. It sounded recent, natural, like I was downstairs talking to someone. I slammed the vent shut and ran. When I reached my apartment, every room was empty. My furniture, my television, my clothes, everything was exactly where it belonged, except the apartment felt used, warm, as though someone had been living there while I was upstairs. That night, I stayed in a motel. The landlord called the next afternoon asking why I'd left my lights on. I told him I hadn't. He paused, then quietly asked, "Were you walking around all night?" I said no. He took a long breath before answering. "I only ask because the tenant below you came to complain." I never went back. Most of my belongings are still in that apartment because I refuse to enter again. The lease eventually expired, and the landlord mailed me what he could recover. One thing was missing: my phone. The same phone with the recording. A month later, I received an email from an unknown address. There was no message, just an audio file. It began with 12 familiar footsteps. Then my own voice whispered, close enough to feel against my ear. "Don't stop walking. It hears silence." The first time my apartment unlocked itself, I blamed my own bad memory. The 5th time it happened, I realized something inside the building knew exactly when I wasn't home. I had just moved into a newly renovated apartment complex after getting a job in another city. Everything was modern: keyless entry, security cameras, motion-activated lights, even an app that let me lock or unlock my door remotely. It felt safer than anywhere I'd ever lived. For the first month, nothing seemed unusual. Then, I started noticing tiny things that didn't make sense. A kitchen cabinet I always kept closed would be slightly open when I came home. A dining chair would be turned a few inches away from the table. the bathroom mirror would have fingerprints, even though I lived alone. None of it was dramatic enough to convince anyone something was wrong. My coworkers joked that I was adjusting to a new place. I tried believing them. One Friday, I left work early because I wasn't feeling well. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed my apartment window was open. I was certain I'd closed it before leaving. I hurried upstairs, expecting a burglary. Nothing was missing. The only thing that stood out was the temperature. The apartment felt occupied. Not warm from the weather. Warm the way a room feels after someone has been sitting in it for hours. I checked every closet, under the bed, even inside the shower. Empty. That night, I opened the building's security app to see if it showed any activity. According to the log, my front door had unlocked at 1:14 p.m., then locked again 3 minutes later. The app listed the unlock as resident access. Only I was the registered resident. I changed my password. The next day, it happened again. Different time, same label. Resident access. Building management insisted it had to be a software glitch. They reset my account and replaced the electronic lock. For 2 days, everything seemed normal. Then, I woke up to every kitchen cabinet standing open. I knew I hadn't done that. I barely slept after that. Instead, I bought a cheap indoor camera and pointed it toward the front door before leaving for work. I spent the entire day checking the live feed whenever I had a chance. Nothing. At exactly 6:08 p.m., while I was driving home, the camera suddenly disconnected. By the time I reconnected it from the parking lot, everything looked normal again.
When I entered the apartment, the camera had been turned to face the wall. I hadn't bought a motorized model. Someone had physically rotated it. Management reviewed the hallway footage. No one had entered. No maintenance workers. No neighbors. No deliveries. The hallway remained empty. The building manager looked genuinely uncomfortable. He admitted another tenant had complained about furniture changing positions several months earlier.
That tenant moved out after 2 weeks. No explanation was ever found. I began testing the apartment. Before leaving each morning, I'd place coins on the floor in little patterns, tape tiny threads across cabinet doors, balance pencils on countertops. Every evening, something had changed. Never everything. Just enough. A thread would be broken. One coin would be missing. A pencil would be lying flat. The apartment felt like it was answering me. One Sunday, I decided not to leave. If something was entering while I was gone, I'd stay home all day. Nothing happened. I made coffee, watched television, read a book. Completely ordinary. Around sunset, I realized I'd forgotten to check the mail downstairs. I was gone less than 2 minutes. When I returned, every picture frame in my apartment had been turned upside down. I stood frozen in the doorway. The security camera was still recording. I immediately watched the footage. For 1 minute and 43 seconds, the video became distorted with digital static. when the picture returned, every frame was already upside down. Nothing appeared between those moments. No person, no shadow, no movement. Just missing time. I called the camera manufacturer thinking it was defective. The technician asked me to upload the corrupted clip. He emailed back later that evening. His message contained only one sentence. Your camera recorded movement during the missing frames, but every image is blank except the reflections. He attached screenshots. At first, I couldn't understand what he meant. Then, I looked closer. The hallway mirror near my front door reflected my living room. The room wasn't empty. Someone was sitting in my favorite chair, not facing the camera, facing my bedroom. The figure looked almost transparent, its outline blurred into the background like smoke trapped beneath glass. Before I could enlarge the image, the file corrupted itself. Every screenshot became solid gray. I decided to move out immediately. Packing took 2 days. The apartment stayed quiet the entire time. No strange noises, no misplaced objects. It almost felt disappointed. On my final morning, I carried the last box to my car. Halfway down the hallway, my phone buzzed. The apartment app had sent a notification.
Front door unlocked. I assumed the system was malfunctioning again. Then, another notification arrived. Resident entered home. I deleted the app before driving away. A week later, curiosity got the better of me. I logged back into my account using the website. My lease had ended. My access had been removed. But the activity history was still there. Every day since I'd moved out, there was exactly one entry. 7:02 p.m. Resident arrived home. No departure was ever recorded. Sometimes I wonder if the system is broken. Other times I wonder if it finally learned my routine well enough that it no longer needed me to be there. The woman in the apartment across from mine waved at me every night for almost 3 weeks. The only problem was, her apartment had been vacant for over a year. I moved into an aging brick apartment complex after my divorce because I wanted somewhere quiet. My unit overlooked a narrow courtyard surrounded by identical buildings. Every window faced another window, close enough that you could recognize your neighbors, but too far away for casual conversation. The first week was uneventful. Then one evening, while washing dishes, I noticed movement in the apartment directly across from mine. A woman stood beside the window. She smiled and gave a slow, polite wave. I waved back, out of instinct. She didn't move again. She simply stood there until I closed the curtains before bed. The next evening, she was back. Same window, same smile, same gentle wave. I mentioned her to the elderly man who lived next door. He looked confused. Across the courtyard? I pointed toward the building. 3rd floor, right there. He stared for several seconds before shaking his head. That apartment's been empty since the flood. I laughed, assuming he had the wrong unit. But the following afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. From the courtyard, I looked up. The apartment was dark. No curtains, no furniture. A faded leasing sign hung crooked inside the glass. That evening, she returned. Only at night. Always in the same spot. Always waving. I started paying closer attention. She wore the same pale sweater every night. Her hair never seemed to move. She never blinked. At exactly 11 p.m., she would step backward into the darkness until I couldn't see her anymore. The routine repeated with unsettling precision. I convinced myself it had to be an optical illusion. Maybe reflections from another building. Maybe someone visiting temporarily. Anything but what my imagination kept suggesting. Then, my sleep began to suffer. Every night, I woke around 3 a.m. with the overwhelming feeling that someone was watching me. The sensation became so intense that I eventually stopped sleeping in my bedroom and moved to the couch. It didn't help. One night, I finally gave in and looked outside. She wasn't in her own window. She was standing at mine. Not outside. Inside the reflection. The glass showed my living room exactly as it was, except behind my couch stood the same smiling woman. I spun around. Nothing. When I looked back at the window, only my own reflection remained. The next morning, I bought thicker curtains. For several days, I kept them closed. No more waving. No more sleepless nights. I thought it was over. Until I began hearing knocks. 3 soft taps. Always on the window. Never on the door. The sound came shortly after sunset. If I ignored it, the knocking stopped after a minute. If I peeked through the curtains, she would already be standing across the courtyard, smiling as though she'd never moved. I stopped looking. Days turned into weeks. The knocking continued. Eventually, I made friends with another tenant, a graduate student named Luis. Without telling him my experiences, I asked if he'd ever noticed anyone in the apartment across from mine. He frowned. "You mean the woman?" My stomach dropped. "You've seen her?" "Only once." "What happened?" He hesitated before answering. "I thought she was waving at me." He paused. But she wasn't. I asked what he meant. He rubbed his arms as if remembering something cold. I realized she was waving at someone standing behind me. Neither of us spoke after that. A few days later, Luis moved out without warning. His apartment was empty by the weekend. That night, the knocking became louder. Not frantic. Patient. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. I finally lost my temper. I yanked the curtains open. The window across the courtyard was empty. For the first time, she wasn't there. I actually felt relieved. Then I noticed every other apartment window. People were standing inside them. Dozens of neighbors. Some I recognized, some I'd never seen before. Every single one of them was looking directly at my apartment. None of them moved. None of them waved, only stared. I blinked. Every window became empty again. The next morning, I asked the building manager whether there had ever been complaints about people watching one another through the courtyard. His expression changed immediately. He asked which apartment I lived in. When I told him, he quietly sighed. "Keep your curtains closed after dark." He unlocked an old filing cabinet and searched through several folders. Finally, he handed me a faded maintenance photograph taken years earlier during repairs after the flood. It showed the courtyard, the windows, my apartment.
And directly across from it, a woman standing behind the glass, smiling, waving. The timestamp on the photograph was dated almost 8 years before I'd moved into the building. I left the apartment that same week. I never looked back. A month later, I received a package that had been forwarded from my old address. Inside was nothing except a framed photograph. It wasn't one I'd ever taken. It showed the courtyard at night from inside my old apartment. The picture had been taken from just behind where my couch used to sit. In the center of the image, I was standing at the window, looking across the courtyard. And in every single window facing mine, people were smiling and waving at me. Every window except one. The apartment directly opposite mine was completely dark. Something had apparently left it.